Hi, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. Asked and answered, Donald Trump has spent 5 days telling 4 minority congresswomen to go back to where they came from. He's repeatedly confirmed that the racist attacks are part of his re-election strategy and that he, quote, enjoys the case he's making against the 4 women of color. And last night, his crowd repeated those racist messages back to him with a haunting chant of "Send her back."
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Trump there clearly pleased by the crowd's reaction. And even today, he's still praising their energy and enthusiasm last night. But by late today, reports in the New York Times and Washington Post surfaced saying that Republicans who have embraced the attacks on the 4 congresswomen, keep in mind 187 House Republicans voted this week to stand with Trump on his racist smear. Well, they got a little wobbly on the full racist thing. The Washington Post reporting, quote, House Republicans questioned Vice President Pence about the episode in a private meeting and asked Trump to distance himself from the racially charged rhetoric. New York Times adds, quote, Republicans pleaded privately with the White House on Thursday to avoid allowing the party to be tied to the message embraced by the crowd in Greenville, North Carolina, even as they declined to criticize Mr. Trump. That may have something to do with Trump's half-hearted half-attempt at a half-step backwards. Trump, asked about the "Send her back" chants today in the Oval Office, responded, quote, I was not happy with it. I disagree with it. But since they simply repeated something he's been saying now loudly and proudly for 5 days, it's unclear to me what exactly he's even pretending to distance himself from. And as we've said every day this week as we've come on the air, it's easy to stare at the trees and ignore the forest, but it's worth reminding ourselves just how far from normal Trump's conduct is for an American leader.
Those who feel like they can intimidate our fellow citizens to take out their anger don't represent the best of America. They represent the worst of humankind, and they should be ashamed of that kind of behavior.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
My liberty depends on you being free too. That history can't be a sword to justify injustice or a shield against progress, but must be a manual for how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past.
That is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. White House Bureau Chief for the Washington Post, Phil Rucker's back. Former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards is here with us at the table. NBC and MSNBC National Affairs Analyst John Heilelmann's here. Jason Johnson, Politics Editor for The Root and former Managing Editor of Time Magazine and a veteran of the Obama administration, Rick Stengel. I'm going to show you all one more thing, mostly because I need to see it. This is President Obama singing Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Jason Johnson, I played that and I showed those other presidents because I think Trump benefits when we cover the news in front of us. I think he benefits when we cover the news of the day. But I think what we are watching is the destruction of the office of the American presidency.
I agree, Nicolle, and I was there because that was my friend Clem's funeral, who was murdered by Dylann Roof. So on a personal level, and I've always said this about the president and his behavior, this leads to violence. because that's where all of this eventually goes. He's turned the presidency not into an office to defend the American people, not into an office to sort of spread American ideals, but into an office to abuse and oppress and elicit violence, both state and vigilante violence against people who live here. We will see more funerals like what we saw with Clem Pinckney if Donald Trump continues. We will see more members of Congress threatened. We've had 2 members of Congress shot in the last 10 years, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. That's the end result. That is the future that he is bringing us. And what deeply concerns me, we were sort of talking about this in the makeup room, I don't think we're going to be okay. I don't think we're going to be okay, because I don't think that the Republican Party recognizes that this is not just about winning and losing. I don't think the Democrats see this as a clear and present danger. And my fear is that Donald Trump will one day leave office, hopefully, but just be replaced by somebody who can say it better. And unless there's a moral reckoning in this country that these ideals are incompatible with a diverse, pluralistic democracy, we're just going to see this for another 25 years. That's my greatest concern, seeing the reaction in Washington, D.C. to the president this week.
Donna Edwards, Jason is the 3rd person this week around this table to warn of impending violence against fellow Americans because of the rhetoric coming from the president, and now thousands of people standing behind him. The first was Congresswoman Bass. The second was former Assistant Director of the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi. Jason's the 3rd. Why aren't the directors of the FBI up on Capitol Hill testifying about what's being done? I mean, after anti-Semitic attacks anywhere in the world, I live in a city where centers of worship at Jewish community centers are fortified by increased police presence and otherwise. Is there, I guess, 2-part question, is there a concern? Do you feel as concerned as Frank Figliuzzi and Congresswoman Bass and Jason? And if you do you encourage your fellow Democrats and Republicans to dig in on this and understand what law enforcement's doing to protect fellow Americans?
Well, I'm deeply concerned. And, you know, unlike presidents of the United States and cabinet members, members of Congress travel throughout their districts. They are not protected on an ongoing basis. They are very vulnerable, as we've seen in the past. And I worry that, you know, the president, by inciting this, and let's be clear, the president said that he was distancing himself from the chants that were going on in Greenville, North Carolina last night. But he wasn't. He stood back and he relished the moment, almost as though nodding his head to encourage the chants. And so we have a president of the United States who has been declared a racist in the United States House of Representatives, and by their complicit silence is leading a racist Republican Party. And it is not just the destruction of the presidency. I think it is the demise of the Republican Party, the one that we knew, I don't know, a decade ago, 5 years ago. And, you know, and I think there is going to be a reckoning, and I worry very, very deeply about the safety of these particular members of Congress, but others who are there speaking freely, as we do in this country, that they are very vulnerable, and the president is inciting this. And, you know, I just don't even know what to say anymore about the president's remarks. They speak for themselves, but my God, I really pray that they don't speak for the rest of us.
Phil Rucker, I spoke to a journalist who was at this rally yesterday, I said, what's it like in the room? She said, it feels like a gateway to a much darker place. I'd like to ask you to do a little bit of fact-checking for us. We didn't air the disavowal because it seemed like total BS. Laura Trump was the warm-up act for Donald Trump, and she led a chant of, if you don't love our country, and then the crowd responded, leave. So there's a direct line between Laura Trump's ask and answer, make a declaration, let the crowd reply, and Donald Trump's subsequent attacks on minority congresswoman, and the chant sent her back.
That's right, Nicolle. And a couple of other details from last night. The crowd of thousands, and it was an almost exclusively white crowd, that was not a chant they came up with. They were chanting back at the president his own words that he put in that tweet on Sunday. He also attacked the 4 congresswomen individually and reading from a teleprompter. This was strategic. This was part of his script. This was what he flew to North Carolina to say and the message that he intended to deliver to the people of North Carolina. And as you see here in the video that's playing, he relished in that moment. He enjoyed that chant. He did nothing to stop it. He could clearly hear what they were saying and didn't think anything of it until a couple of hours ago today.
Heilelmann.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said here is right, and George Conway wrote this thing earlier this week where he said, as many of the times he's criticized Trump, that he had always wanted to hold out this hope that he wasn't really a racist bigot, and then this last few days has proven to him that he was. My side of that has been that I've sought and said as critical things about Donald Trump as anybody has ever done over the course of the last couple of years, but I just never thought we'd quite get to the point where you'd see a president of the United States targeting an individual member of Congress with violence, effectively. I mean, it's a ridiculous piece of gaslighting today to claim that he wasn't happy with it. He was delighted by it. You watched him on stage. He was loving everything that was happening, and he was leading this, telling lies about this woman, demonizing her for days. Ilhan Omar in particular, although he's attacked all of the women in the squad, but her in particular. And you know why? Because she is the most exotic looking to his eye. She is the one who was not born here. She is the one who has African pedigree. He has selected her out. The name sounds more foreign. And he's chosen her, demonized her, lied about her, demagogued her, and then whipped this crowd into a violent, frothing, hate-filled frenzy, and now stands back and says, well, I wasn't happy about it. I mean, it's the most disgusting of the many Trump lies, and there have been tens of thousands of them now. So I never thought I'd see that. I've seen a lot of bad stuff in covering politics for a long time, but I never thought I'd see a president targeting an American citizen directly in that way. And he's placed a target on her back, and I think Donna Edwards is right. If I were, Ilhan Omar deserves some kind of special protection. She should have it right now, because I think she's an incredible risk as she wanders around the world right now, because there are a lot of people out there, I think, who would happily take a shot at her, and of one kind or another. And I think that's all on Donald Trump's shoulders. And the other thing I'll say, just briefly, is it's amazing if you think about, how history judges presidents. We really just from 30,000 feet years later, you look at them and you kind of go thumbs up, thumbs down. And most of what thumbs up, thumbs down turns out to be about is peace and prosperity. Presidents have foibles. They make a lot of mistakes. But if you govern in a time that's peaceful and prosperous, kind of history thinks well of you. No one today thinks that Donald Trump will be well regarded by history, despite the fact that he's governed in a time of peace and prosperity. Hasn't gotten us in any wars. We have a good economy. And yet there's not a historian alive right now who, if they were casting their minds forward 20 years from now, would not say Donald Trump's the worst president ever. And why? You have to do a lot to repudiate peace and prosperity. And the reason is stuff like this, where he has done all the things that Jason said I don't need to repeat, where he's made hate and division the core of what he's doing, and the core of what he seems to absolutely enjoy doing, and what he plans to do. And I fear that the volume is not anywhere near up to 11 yet. It's going to get louder, and it's going to get worse over the course of the next 15 months.
Rick, the piece of the tape we picked from previous presidents, it was George W. Bush at a mosque because he thought it was important in the hours after 9/11 to go and make clear that Islam was a peaceful religion, that these were our friends and our neighbors. And that was, I think, one of the first public events he did. President Obama was, as you so eloquently said, at a funeral for innocent Americans who died in hate and racially inspired violence. John McCain was confronting really a Republican activist. The only people who go to campaign events are the kinds of people that you really need in your corner. They're not just the people that vote, they're the people that canvass for you. These were presidents, these were American leaders, plenty polarizing. In the case of my old bosses, for a lot of good reason, plenty unpopular. But I'd take the rest of time with any one of them over 10 more minutes with this one.
Yeah. No, I saw your eyes misting up when President Obama was singing Amazing Grace. I mean, And all of them are the behavior of men who understand that the President of the United States has to model the better angels of our nature, the best possible things about American values and the content of our character. And that's what they were doing. And it's just such a sad contrast to see Barack Obama singing Amazing Grace and then the tape from last night. I was actually thinking while you both were talking about the darkness and the violence, that the famous Victor Hugo line, in the darkness sins will be committed, and those who should be punished are not those who commit the sins, but those who cause the darkness. Donald Trump is causing this immense darkness, this curtain to come over our country, and it is mobilizing the worst angels of our nation. I mean, as we've all said, his whole campaign is about mobilizing racism, mobilizing this terrible behavior. I mean, I would never say, and no one here would say, that everybody who voted for Donald Trump was a racist. That is, of course, not true. But every racist voted for Donald Trump. And what they are doing...
Let me press you to what may be an uncomfortable place. Is everyone that Chants sent her back a racist? Can we see their faces again? Can I see the faces? Can I see that again? Can you turn it up? She racist, Rick?
So, you know what that made me think of, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but I go back to the Nixon in '68 and Nixon in '72, where you had the Republican Party and the President of the United States demonizing everyone who was a Democrat by saying that they were not patriotic. I mean, part of the problem of our politics is, as you guys know, the Republican Party kind of hijacked patriotism for itself. And remember, running against George McGovern, right? George McGovern was a fighter pilot in World War II. He won the Distinguished Flying Cross, and yet Nixon made him seem like someone who was unpatriotic, who didn't love America, and that anybody who would support the Democratic candidate didn't love America, and you should leave it.
I respect your right to not answer that question, but if your lips are moving with the word "send her back," I call you a racist.
Not only is that woman racist, not only is everyone chanting they're racist, at this particular point, and I've always said this before, you've heard me say this, Nicolle, I don't care if the president's racist or not, it is the policies and the things that you promote. And at this particular point, everyone who votes for Donald Trump is okay with a racist president. So I don't care if you're racist in your personal life. That means you're comfortable with racism being an integral part of any policy that this person creates. If you support him in any shape or form, you are supporting racism. And if you're supporting racism, you're supporting his white nationalism, which is the antithesis of how this country operates. We have to call a thing a thing. It's not about hurt feelings. It's not about what's in somebody's heart. It's about how it's manifesting and how our policies operate. And that's the danger here. And I think this is also key when we talk about who these women are. It's not just for women of color, right? They're from the heartland. This is somebody from Minnesota, somebody from Michigan. This is from working class parts of New York. He attacked the heartland of this country. They represent millions of people. And he said, your representatives and therefore your government, just like he talks about our judges and everything else like that, don't matter if I don't like them. And that's the danger.
Just on this one point, which I think is kind of, it's amazing like a small hair-splitting thing. And there's no world in which, having said what I just said, I'm forgiving. I'm in any way trying to make Donald Trump forgive what he said. But it's interesting to me that the way the crowd, and this gets directly to your point, his ostensible point is America, love it or leave it, right? Which is what Republican presidents and others said about Vietnam protesters, and it's got a long history. Not all racial, mostly about protest and about dissent and about trying to compel a kind of mindless nationalism, not patriotism, but nationalism. The crowd has adopted a different chant. It's not America, love it or leave it in that crowd. It's send her back. And as ugly as love it or leave it aimed at these four women is, uglier and apparently organic in this crowd, send her back is expel her from the country. Get her out of here, make her leave, deport her. So to your point, yeah, racist, of course it's racist. To stand there in a crowd and go be further worse than Donald Trump on this issue, not merely say she should either love the country or get out of here, but to say that woman must go. Yeah, that's I think you can't avoid the fact that someone who stands in a rally like that and chants that about Ilhan Omar has hate in their heart and is racist to the core.
Phil Rucker, what's the plan for tomorrow for this White House?
Well, Nicolle, I don't know. I don't think this story is going to end for President Trump. And there are a couple other things at that rally, too, that were really striking. There were children there. These were not just adult supporters of the president, but people brought their sons and their daughters of various ages to see the president of the United States. And what they came away with was feeling like it was okay to chant things like that because the president allowed it and encouraged it. And so, you know, there could be a reckoning here, but I think Trump is going to try to continue this fight with these 4 congresswomen. His advisors, the people I've been talking to this week, say it's good for them. The president likes this. He wants to keep going. He wants to push it further. And as someone was saying earlier, we're not at volume level 11. I don't even think we're at volume level 8. I think this could get a lot uglier between now and November of 2020.
Does Ivanka still work there, Phil?
She is still the president's daughter and senior advisor, and it's funny, you know, she's been silent throughout all of this all week, and now we're starting to see the anonymous leaks in some newspapers that she had counseled her father to distance himself from the chants rather at the rally. So we'll see, but we have seen nothing public from her.
You know, the Phil's point about the people bringing their kids, I don't have as despairing of you as you do, but what upsets me is this idea that it's a multi-generational effect that he's having, that these children who are at a rally hearing a chant like that will grow up modeling that behavior. They'll do that in school. They'll become bullies. I mean, it's just, I mean, you know, one of the glories of...
I'm not worried about the bullies. Bullies sort of seem to take care of themselves. I'm worried about their victims. Yeah. I mean, because I don't think we're that far away from, in the places you just named, young children of color. I'm not worried about the bullies. Somehow you don't read a lot of stories about bullies jumping off bridges. I'm worried about their victims. And the fact that we're not having a national conversation, that Republicans aren't participating in any national conversation about keeping people safe, when you've got thousands of white people screaming, "Send her back," is a national emergency. And we are, I think Roger Ailes would be disgusted. And I think Roger Ailes put this in motion. Fox News gives Donald Trump his cues because he can't think for himself. And I think they have created a Frankenstein, and they're going to deeply regret what they have put in motion. Phil Rucker, thank you for spending some time with us. Good luck on that beat. After the break, rapid response.